Welcome everyone to our May meeting, back together again. Before we get started, I'm going to ask Liz to give us kind of an overview of how the technology is going to work.
Thank you, Beth. So we have kind of a rigged up method of doing this today, but we are joining Microsoft Teams through the audio, which is the conference phone in the middle of the room. So, for example, Dan, you're kind of on the far end there. If you say something, make sure you project really well so the conference phone can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. And then obviously our staff will present from this side. We'll have a little switcheroo halfway through to make sure we're closer to the conference line, but just make sure as you're going that you speak up. We really have the volume as loud as we can have it. So I know, for example, Judd, I know you're joining us through Teams today. We'll do our best to make sure we project and talk loudly, but we're kind of as loud as we can be. So we'll do our best today, and thank you for joining us in person.
Okay, well, we've patched together a pretty good year, I think, considering all we've been through, so we'll make it through this one too. Welcome everybody. Judd, I'm going to ask you to call the roll, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll go slow for the people on virtual, and there's a couple of things. Mike Allen.
Present.
Dennis Bland. Ann Bowen.
Here.
John Costas.
Virtually present.
Trent Engbert.
Here.
I'm here. Alan Hubbard.
Here.
Chris Lamone.
Here.
Tupper Moran. Tupper there?
No, she's not yet.
Okay. Chris Murphy. Chris. Ian Peterson.
Here.
Beverly Fitt.
Here.
John Todd. John, are you there?
John is there but muted.
I'm checking them off. Madam Chair, Kevin Ford. Thank you.
Thank you, Judd. Thank you, Judd. I do want to welcome everybody to our first meeting together. Actually, I've never had a gavel in my hand, well, at least for a long time. This is I will work it today. But it's really nice to be able to see each other again and to move a little bit further down the line. And I'm amazed at all we've accomplished and how well things have gone thanks to an incredible staff through this very, very difficult time. So welcome back to everybody. Just a couple of things that I wanted to mention that Stephanie has taken a position, in case you didn't know, I think all of us do, but she's taken a position in Washington with Common App, and that's related to admissions, I think you know. She assumed the role of Director of the Executive Office, where she will provide strategic direction, that's right down her alley, for the team to ensure smooth admissions process for students across the country, and we will miss her very much, but we certainly wish her well. Commissioner Lovers has recommended the promotion of Charlie Bieser to Associate Commissioner for Communications and Outreach. We are all aware of Charlie's significant skills and are happy to have her a part of the senior leadership team. However, according to the bylaws, this action requires approval of the commission. So I will ask for a motion.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Aye.
You're stuck with your job.
Oh, darn. Thank you.
Motion passes. Congratulations, Charlie. And also I want to mention to all the staff who assumed new roles to cover some of Stephanie's responsibilities. So great new team structure, good for everybody. And now I will turn it over to Commissioner Lovers for her report.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Chris Murphy joined.
Oh, thank you, Chris. We got you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I joined the chair in acknowledging that how grateful we are to be back together, those of us who could be here, and then those of you who are with us. We look forward to in June being together, more of us actually on a college campus. We're going to start traveling again. We've missed the opportunity to do that. Just a word about Steph's departure. I think one of the great things about people who leave the commission, as evidenced by many of the people who are with the universities now, is they often they get a commitment to higher education if they continue when they move to other places. And so I think that's a really great thing, and obviously Steph's going to do that with Common App as well. I know that some of you were able to join us at the Weldon conference this year. We were unable to have the Weldon conference last year, at which point we were going to really focus on the new strategic plan, which you all adopted at the end of 2019. But for those of you who weren't there, just to reiterate a little bit that happened this year, we really highlighted the GPS work that was done through CICP with Brookings and the American Enterprise Institute. First of all, it's very interesting that those two think tanks came together. There aren't many times that they've actually worked on a project together like that, and so I think they've really enjoyed the opportunity to do that. And they sort of differentiated their offer, and Mark Murrow called out the need to do several things, of which the one that probably overlaps with our work the most is the work to really to increase digital competency in both educational and employer level, to really make sure that we're prepared for the future, and show some pretty sobering statistics showing where we're not keeping up in the way that we need to in advanced industries. I mean, the good news is that all 92 counties in Indiana actually have at least one advanced industry, so we have someplace to work off of. And Ryan, actually, who's from Indiana and certainly knows this place well, worked in the governor's office at one point. He really, through AEI, really focused on sort of the social and civic aspects of our economy and things that we need to do in that regard. I think all of us, and we've had subsequent meetings about this, that one of the most sobering statistics, and this was discussed even yesterday when the Chamber of Commerce now has a group called Indiana Vision 2025 Plus Task Force, and that this statistic, which I'm going to mention, came up at the meeting yesterday of that task force, and it was that more Hoosiers compared to the rest of the Midwest or the nation believe that a high school diploma is sufficient for the current and emerging economy. Now, I think it's important to say, when I say more, we were at about 25% of Hoosiers who thought that, compared to nationwide 17% and the Midwest 18%. That means that still the majority of Hoosiers know that you need some sort of quality credential beyond high school. But I think it does, it jives a little bit with what we've seen in the reduction in our college going rate and some other statistics that I think we're going to talk about today and that we need to deal with. But it seems to me that one of our most critical things that we need to do as a commission is to really help create a culture that values education in multiple pathways, but that provide for economic mobility. And I think we've been working hard on this, and that I think we're going to have to double down our efforts. We certainly saw some evidence of that even in the legislative session, that some would question the value of higher education. And so I think we need to more clearly talk about the value proposition and increase the value proposition at the same time. So more to come with that. I think we're committed as a staff to really spending more time traveling the state, combining our meetings around the state with opportunities to meet with legislators and community leaders and others, our K-12 partners, to really focus on these efforts on the value proposition of higher ed. The Governor's Workforce Cabinet, which I'm still chairing, has also received some additional funding to continue to work on the programs that we are advocating here, especially Next Level Jobs and especially the Workforce Ready Grant. We received some additional funding to continue those programs. One of the things that we received funding for is to create an aligned integrated dashboard that shows the predictors of success for early childhood education through lifelong learning. More to come on that front. We're working to try to figure out exactly how we do that, and then more importantly, once you know what those predictors of success are, how do you drive the strategies around them. Several things that I know Josh is going to talk about that new charges that we had from the legislature this year. A good news story is that in order to address the need for the learning loss that we know actually happened during the year of COVID, there was about $150 million put in the budget to deal with that, and we'll be working with the Department of Education, in particular on two summer initiatives. One effort is to reach about 6,000 students to use the summer months to really complete the Indiana College Core or to complete their technical certificate or their CTE certificate. So many lost the opportunity to do that. We want to use those summer months very intentionally to help them do that. And the second initiative targets helping about 3,500 students, help them stay on track. We did use some of our Gear Up money last summer to start some of these programs where we knew students were going to be behind. We learned some things, but we're going to be working with Ivy Tech to have a statewide virtual summer program that includes mentors for those students as well. Later in the meeting, we are going to highlight, I've already made reference in the college going rate, we'll be talking about some of the legislative issues and the college readiness report. What will become abundantly clear in both of these reports is that the thing that's working, that's defying all the odds, college going, college success, is the 21st Century Scholars Program. So we can certainly make the case for that program, and it's going to be displayed in the data that we provided to you today. One of the strategies that was outlined in our, I'm sorry, I have so many things to talk about today, but there's a lot going on. One of the strategies that was aligned in our strategic plan was focused on the Educator Pipeline and making sure that we were recruiting and retaining more teachers, and especially a focus on a diverse teaching core. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to participate with Dr. Jetter and with President Ellspermann and with President Elsner from Marian University to announce a really exciting new program which actually allows students to start in high school working on their associate degree, get an associate's degree through Ivy Tech, have seamless transfer to Marian, and a master's degree. Collectively, you could get all three of those degrees at no more than $45,000, and that's not even including the financial aid that you would receive for other programs. And so I think it's a great example. You know, we hear so much and so often about the inflexibility of higher education and whether they're innovative. And I think this is a great example of a program, a public and a private institution coming together, addressing a significant need with really strong outcomes, which I think will be, not only will you create a more diverse teaching core, but I think when those students have that, they will be more likely to think of teaching as a profession as well. So we're really excited about that program, and it will be piloting this fall. I had the opportunity to meet briefly with Indiana University's new president, Dr. Pamela Whitten, who became the 19th president, named in mid-April. I know all of you probably saw coverage of that announcement. She was described as a leader who has a student-centered approach. It certainly aligns with what we talk about here with everything, and a collaborative style of leadership. Most recently, she was at Kennesaw State University in Georgia as the president, and we look forward to meeting with her at a future time, and we appreciate the commission being included with the opportunity to meet her when she was here. So finally, in keeping, I've been trying to share just a little snippet at every meeting about the 50th anniversary of the commission, and this time I'd like to briefly talk about the commission's second commissioner. I knew very little about him, Dr. Richard Gibb, who was appointed in March 1974 and served in that role, I think, for about 3 years, which would be the shortest period of time of our 6 commissioners, including me, the shortest period of time that any commissioner was in that role. We've only had 6 commissioners in 50 years, which is pretty amazing when you compare that to most others, to a traditional state agency. He actually grew up in the Midwest, and he attended the University of Illinois. He had a career in the U.S. Army Special Services Office, and then began a lifelong career in higher education in South Dakota, Indiana, and Idaho. After he left the commission, he served as the president of the University of Idaho for the remainder of his career from 1977 until 1989. It's a long time for a college president. He died fairly young, in his early 60s, I believe, of cancer. A tidbit of information, when he was commissioner, our office was at 143 West Market Street, which is the street just across from the Capitol building. So with that, Madam Chair, I concluded my report.
And it was very thorough. No, it's great to hear all the little bits and pieces of things that are going on that you can easily forget and or need to know about. I'm especially excited about the teacher.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Thank you. I think we're ready to turn to committee reports and academic affairs. My prerogative, you're first, Ed.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. AA&Q met on April 26th and considered 5 program proposals. 4 of those are on your agenda for expedited action, which is the default mode of taking action on new programs. One of those, an Ivy Tech associate degree, is on your agenda for full discussion. Now, sometimes full discussion items get on your agenda because there's a policy issue or concern related to them. That's certainly not the case with this program. Rather, there were some interesting aspects about the program that we thought it would be good for the Commission to spend a little time discovering a little more about. So in any case, that program is on for full discussion. The committee also had a presentation from Ivy Tech with respect to its new Hamilton County campus. This is, since Ivy Tech is accredited as a single institution, the addition of a new campus is considered more an administrative matter, but we thought it would be good to hear a little more about that. Finally, we had scheduled a presentation from Indiana University on a program review of their online programs. The Commission has been concerned about or interested in quality assurance matters, and this review we thought would be a way to communicate how some of the accreditation processes can stay on top of the quality with which programs are offered. So that's on the agenda for the AA&Q meeting later this month.
Thank you, Ken. We're ready to turn to budget and productivity. Chris and Alexa. I'm guessing Chris is going to say Alexa.
Yeah, Alexa, I'm not sure if you want to comment here, and I can hold my comments to the tuition and fee discussion when we start the business items. What do you recommend?
Yeah, let's, I'll be presenting that after this committee report out, so we'll just wait for that until then, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you. The Budget and Productivity Committee met on April 28th, and we had 3 discussion items on the agenda. One is the Franco Bannon Award grant recommendation, and Josh will be presenting that later this afternoon. And then we also talked through the 21-23 tuition and fee recommendation, which I will be presenting after the committee report outs. And then the third item was a summary of the final budget, which I will briefly talk through that real quick. And I provided you, the people in person, a document, just a colorful one. And I'm sorry, I'll send it to everybody else that's remote after this meeting. But I just wanted to kind of highlight the high-level items in the budget. So as you may recall, a 7% reserve was placed on the higher education operating items for fiscal year 21 at the beginning of this fiscal year. And the budget bill restored those 7% cuts in fiscal year 22 to the appropriation levels that resulted in the 1921 outcomes-based funding formula. And then for fiscal year 23, higher education operating was funded at 7% through outcomes-based funding, with 2% new money and 5% reallocation of the base. There were no new bonded higher education capital projects, but there was 11.6 million cash funded for regional deferred maintenance. 8.1 million went to IU, and then 3.5 million went to Purdue. For repair and rehabilitation, they maintained each institution's fiscal year 21 appropriation. Dual credit, they funded at $45 per credit hour. For the line items, they maintained the fiscal year 21 funding levels, but they also funded the Purdue Fort Wayne academic expansion at $2.425 million per year for each year of the biennium. And then finally, for student financial aid, they funded that, they maintained the fiscal year 21 appropriation levels. And that is all that we reviewed and voted on.
Thank you, Alexa and Chris, too. And student success and completion, Mike and Chris.
Well, our committee was scheduled to meet in April, but I had unexpectedly traveled out of town, so we postponed the meeting because it was going to be a very good topic. But we're going to have our meeting on May 25th, so no report at this time.
Great. We'll look for a double report.
Of course.
Minutes are in your agenda book from last meeting, March the 11th. We need a motion to approve.
I'll move that. Approval?
Second,
Second.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
I,
Motion carries. Okay, I'm going to do this for the minutes.
With us over.
Okay, I think we're ready to turn to the business items. The first one is the tuition recommendation. Each biennium, as has already been said, the commission must set non-binding tuition and mandatory fee targets. The budget committee has prepared their recommendation. I will turn the meeting over to Chris and Alexa to walk us through those recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would maybe just make an additional comment prior to Alexa going through the slides. But this was an item that the commission budget committee spent quite a bit of time on. As all of you know, this has been a remarkably unusual year and a half or so with universities and students, faculty, significantly affected by COVID in multiple ways. At the same time, it's been an interesting time in federal monies pouring into the states and also into higher education. And so there were a lot of factors that went into the discussion around what might we do in our state to support our higher education partners while also encouraging criticality of the driving efficiency in our higher education system and really making higher education kind of I guess I'm tapping a little bit on the commissioner's comments, really not only critically important but affordable. So we have put together what we believe to be a reasonable compromise on how to really thread the needle on encouraging our partners to continue focus on efficiency in higher education with quality, but also recognition that they've been through some very challenging times over the last year and a half or so. So that's kind of the backdrop behind our recommendation and our encouragement of our higher education partners to work to hit these recommendations. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alexa.
Thank you. As Madam Chair has stated, the commission is required to recommend mandatory tuition and fees for the public higher education institutions every biennium. The commission must make these recommendations no later than 30 days after the enactment of the state budget. And then the institutions must hold a public hearing after the commission sets these non-binding tuition and mandatory fee targets. And then the tuition and fees for the next 2 academic years must be set by the institutions no later than 60 days after the enactment of the state budget. So these are the deadlines for this biennium. So first we're going to take a look at tuition and fees in the historical context. This chart plots average tuition and mandatory fee rates at Indiana's public higher education institutions, which is the blue line, and then the red line is the 1-year percentage change in these average tuition and mandatory fees. Average tuition and mandatory fees have more than doubled in the last 20 years. And more specifically, we saw a large spike in tuition and fee rate increases in 2002 and 2003. And this related to the $233 million cut in the 01-03 budget for higher education. But despite large increases in tuition and mandatory fees, starting in the 06-07 academic year, the yearly tuition and mandatory fee rate increases has been on a steady decline. And in 13-14, it hit about 2%, and since then it's been either at 2% or lower than that. One factor relating to the low tuition and fee rate increases has been the partnership between CHE and the public institutions on the Commission's tuition and fee recommendation. The next two slides show the last two biennia and the Commission's tuition and fee recommendation and the actual increases at the institutions. In 2017-19, the Commission's recommendation was a maximum of 1.4% increase for each year of the biennium. And as you can see, 6 of the universities met our maximum. And then in 2019-21, the Commission's maximum annual increase was 1.65% as a maximum, and 4 of the institutions met our maximum recommendation. So now that we've looked at tuition and fees in Indiana in the historical context, let's look at Indiana and how we compare to the rest of the nation with a focus on college affordability. Indiana's recent tuition increases were among the lowest in the nation according to data provided by College Board in the annual survey of colleges. At Indiana's public four-year institutions, the in-state tuition and mandatory fee rates grew by an average of 2.2% each year from 2010-11 to 2020-21. And compared to the national average, which is 3.8%, this brought Indiana as third in the nation for the lowest average one-year increases in that 10-year period. In-state tuition and fee rate increases at Indiana's public two-year institutions was just above the national average at 4.4%, while the national average for two-year institutions was also 3.8%. Additionally, the state of Indiana fares well nationally in providing need-based financial aid to cover the educational expenses. The state of Indiana will provide approximately $390 million over this next biennium in student financial aid. Indiana ranks first in the Midwest and fourth in the nation in per-student need-based financial aid. And as a reminder, the majority of our financial aid programs can only be used for tuition and fees. So now we will get into our staff recommendation. The Commission staff considered several factors when establishing the tuition and mandatory fee rates for this biennium. First of all, the value proposition of higher education, as the Commissioner mentioned earlier and we discussed later. The idea that a high school diploma is enough is reflected in Indiana's declining college going rate, which has dropped 6 percentage points in the past 4 years. So clearly we must do more to prove to Hoosiers the value of education and encourage students to go to college. And I think that increasing affordability in higher education is a great way to do this. We also looked at the 21-23 higher education budget, where the state invested 2% new dollars in operating funding for higher education. And then state fiscal liability and student need. State financial aid covers tuition and fee expenses, so keeping tuition and fee increases low will allow us to stay within our allotted appropriations. And the cost of CBO, National Guard, 21st Century, and Workforce Ready Grant, they're all tied to tuition and fees. So as tuition and fees increase, so does the cost of the program. We also looked at student debt. At Indiana's two-year institutions, 43% of graduates accumulated over $12,000 in student loan debt. And at public four-year institutions, 63% of graduates accumulated over $25,000 in student loan debt. We also considered the higher education emergency relief funding. While we understand that this funding must be tied to losses in revenues from relating to the COVID-19 pandemic, it must be considered when recommending our tuition and fees, our fee rates for this specific biennium. Public higher education institutions will receive about $985 million in this COVID-19 relief funding. However, about $425 million will go directly to students for the purpose of emergency financial aid grants. And then finally, we looked at an inflation indicator. So the consumer price index provides a view of cost changes from the perspective of the consumer, particularly Hoosier students and their families. The CPI measures the change in prices and goods over time. To keep the price of education flat relative to other goods and services, it must be constrained by an overall price index, not a higher education inflation index. Using the index measuring inflation of all goods and services in the Midwest region of the country is a practical methodology to ensure we meet this objective. While the staff preference is to keep tuition and fees flat, we recommend that if tuition and fees must be increased, they do not exceed a maximum of 1.45% each year for both years of the biennium. For this biennium, we looked at the CPI in the Midwest, and we did the 3-year compound annual growth rate for this to get to the 1.45%. This approach is consistent with the methodology used in the 15-17 biennium, and this maximum is less than the Commission's previous recommendation and is on par with the 17-19 recommendation. If we look at the 3-year compound annual growth rate for Hoosier per capita income, it comes in at 2.45%. The staff recommendation of a maximum of 1.45% annual increase falls below the Hoosier per capita income. In other words, we're not recommending an increase to tuition and fees that exceeds the income experienced by Hoosier families. Affordability must be maintained in order to ensure access and to meet our 60% goal by 2025. So as I said previously, the Commission staff preference is to keep tuition and fee rates flat, but if tuition and fees are increased, we recommend that they do not exceed a maximum of 1.45% per year for each year of the biennium. And this chart shows the impact of what the maximum 1.45 increase would look like at each institution. Are there any questions?
There may be comments that commission members would like to make.
Let's open it up for any comments or questions or discussion.
Is this page 13 of our book? We're going to be voting on this.
Yes.
Is this what we're voting on? I would have a slight tweak. But I just, the way you present it is, it's like we're for no increase or up to 1.45. I would say we're for no increase, but in no instance should tuition and fees go up more than 1.45. Just make it clear that we're for no increase.
We've said up to no greater than 1.45. I mean, we can add some additional words to that, but we've made it pretty clear in the recommendations that it would be up to no greater than 1.45.
Right, but, well, I shouldn't have got that. But you're saying recommendation is flat or?
I think they changed that language, Al.
It says commission staff recommendation is flat, or if tuition fees must be increased up to no greater than 1.45%.
If we changed or to but with that.
I would just take a period and then I'd go, if tuition fees must be.
Okay, we can do that.
I mean, the issue we have is that we do not have any enforcement actions here, right? Other than peer pressure, what other enforcement provisions do we have? I mean, that's the limiting factor that I think we have in making our recommendations. I wholeheartedly support the recommendation, but it's kind of a hollow recommendation when we can't enforce. There's no enforcement capability.
I think the best that we've been able to do in this regard is, I think the impact, if you look from the time 2009 when we started setting those and the information that Alexa has provided certainly has, I think it's not, it's not a coincidence that these numbers have been there since we've been setting those targets. The other thing that has been clear is that members of the legislature, when institutions have exceeded the targets established by the commission, have asked them to provide a justification and rationale for that. So that would be another way in which they could say, if you've exceeded what the commission said the recommendation should be, and the board and your individual school board of trustees have supported that, provide a justification to us for that. So it does. These are non-binding targets. We recognize that the boards of trustees set the tuition of the individual institutions, but I think to the degree that the thoughtfulness with which we make these recommendations is understood by legislators and others, it gives us something for the discussion.
Madam Chair, if I could make a comment, I agree with Al's position. I think that putting the period there is appropriate, and I understand we don't have any power. Having said that, do we, when we release this, do we show the kind of graph that you just showed, Alexa just showed us in the presentation, that this was the recommendation of the past, this is what the school's done, this is our recommendation now, so that there's more light shown on that issue?
So when you'll be talking about when Alexa called out the institutions that had actually met our recommendations?
Yeah, she showed the graph, at least the graph I saw that she was taking us through. She showed what our recommendation was and who was under and who was above. And then she showed that, I think she showed that twice here for the most recent. I don't know if those are published when we make our recommendation or not, or are publicly distributed, but I would recommend that they be, at least that's a little more public in terms of what's happening.
We can do that.
I think also we can accept, if everybody is comfortable with it, this is just an editorial change by putting the period and then the capital I for if doesn't really change the meaning in any way.
No.
Generally.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Great.
Of course, since we've had our meeting, the consumer price index has gone up. The most it's gone up in about 25 or 30 years. So, but I still think that the idea of keeping it flat, it can be done. Purdue has proven it, and it's going to be a little tougher, but it's still doable, I think.
Any other comments? Discussion? Well, let's put a motion out there. Somebody want to move approval of this?
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? Give everybody a full opportunity. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Sorry.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, everybody. I got an email for coffee, huh?
Take cream, please.
Thank you, Chris and Alexa, for a really very thorough report and very helpful to see the background material as well.
And a lot of work on it,
And
too.
a lot of work to the committee for all that work as well. Speaking of a lot of work, Josh has been busy, as has his staff. The legislative session is over, and there's lots to report. So Josh is going to lead us through a discussion of what happened and what the implementation is going to be like for us. So Josh, we turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to be back in person. It's hard to believe that it was March of 2020, the last time that we were all together for a presentation. And a little bit happier circumstances today than it was on that day, so we're trying to figure out what to do moving forward. But for both of them, it was at the end of the legislative session, and we were covering what we were planning on doing. So today, I just want to walk through what has happened around higher education in the legislative session, and specifically focused on the items that the commission has been tasked with this upcoming year. As I've said in the previous presentations, this was unlike any other session that I've been a part of due to how much remote work was being done and how little access we had to legislators compared to previous years. So just as always, just a quick overview. The General Assembly recessed on April 22nd. They did not adjourn sine die. They are going to stay open until November 15th. They'll come back in the fall for redistricting. So they actually on this past Monday came in for a technical corrections bill and a veto override, as well as assigning summer study committee topics, and I'll mention one that impacts the commission here at the end of the presentation as well. This session, there were 130 bills that dealt with K-12 higher education and higher education, with 30 of them passing, which is fewer bills than previous years just because there were fewer bills filed due to some of the restrictions on bill filing. And as I mentioned, we will see the General Assembly in for redistricting later in the fall. So with that, I want to walk through all of the legislative tasks that the Commission received during the session. Two of them we were actively involved with in terms of our bills that we were helping shepherd through the legislature. And then the other one, which is House Enrolled Act 1549, kind of came in at the end, and I'll give some background on that. To start, I do want to mention the Fafsa Bill, because we have for the past 3 years had a bill which would have high school seniors complete the Fafsa as part of a graduation requirement, or they could be opted out by the principal, a parent, or if the student is 18. That passed the Senate in that format, and in the House it became an incentive. It was no longer a requirement. It would have been a financial incentive for schools to encourage their students to file the FAFSA. It would have been based on a formula dealing with how the levels of poverty and socioeconomic status of the students in the school. Unfortunately, that bill did not make it out of conference committee. There was some disagreement on the House and the Senate on which way that bill should go. So we'll come back next year and see what we can do with that one. And I'll talk about FAFSA filing a little bit later during the Franco Bannon presentation. So with that, the two bills that we were probably most involved with, one being our agency bill and another bill being one that was another agency's bill, are Senate Enrolled Act 101 and House Enrolled Act 1553. We mentioned this in every presentation, but Senate Enrolled Act 101 covered improving the high school graduation plan. This would allow us to build the high school graduation plan as part of Scholar Track. That is a process where the student due to this change in 8th grade will map out what courses they plan on taking in high school, what are their post-secondary and career pathways that they're interested in, at least at that point in time, and they'll update it throughout high school. We will be building this into an online form that students can then track and counselors can use. We can also then pull information about career interests that the student may have and share that with counselors and employers in the regions, as so long as we have the proper releases on that. Previously, we talked about transcripts from closed institutions. This provision dealt with a small provision around students who had back bills at the time of the school's closure, and this ensured that we received all of those transcripts as well. We are now allowed to let minors, 17-year-olds, enter into a promissory note for our Next Generation Future Educator Scholarship. 1553 expands the qualifications for the Next Generation Future Educator Scholarship. It allows us to look at a 3.5 GPA instead of just the ACT, SAT, or class rank. And then the National Guard actually was 1553 was the National Guard's bill, and they were seeking a change to the scholarship program that we run for them, that graduate credits would be covered by the program. This is a recruitment tool and a retention tool for the National Guard, and they feel that by adding graduate credits, they're going to be able to encourage more individuals to take part in that. As well as it changes the program from 4 years to allowing for 6 years of eligibility. It'll be our only 6-year eligibility program that we offer out of the 19 programs that we run financial aid-wise. With that, any questions on those two bills? Sorry. With that, I want to talk about House Enroll Act 1549. And this is a bill that we affectionately call a Franken bill because it takes pieces of dead bills and puts them all together there at the end of session and something comes out from it. So this bill actually takes 6 pieces of legislation and combines them together and includes 26 different provisions that impact higher education, and K-12, and the workforce. 6 of the provisions directly impact work that the commission does. And this bill evolved all the way right down to the last day with a pretty interesting conference committee report on the Senate floor. So as we go through this, feel free to ask questions. I apologize for how wordy some of these slides are. They're reports, so there's a lot of information I wanted to convey and make sure that you all had it in front of you. So with that, the first item that the commission will be required to do is to work with our state educational institutions to ensure that Cambridge International will provide credit on college campuses. And Cambridge International, similar to International Baccalaureate or AP, is a curriculum that ends with an assessment that if you score well enough, then you can oftentimes earn post-secondary credit. This would require us to, by December 31st of this year, ensure that the state educational institutions have a policy in place for awarding credit for these. Dr. Sauer's team will be leading that effort for the commission. And some institutions already have at least partial policies in place. I don't think any institution has a full policy in place right now for all of the Cambridge courses. So this is something that we will be working on throughout the course of the next 7 months.
So is Cambridge International a private entity, or who is that?
Yes.
Is it all online?
It's a private entity. It's in the schools itself. And I'm going to get on my depth really quick here, so I'll ask Dr. Sauer to add anything that he may want to add about Cambridge International. But it is similar to AP, a curriculum that the teachers provide, and there's an assessment at the end.
It's really associated with Cambridge University.
Oh, is it? Okay, I see.
Is this for high school?
Yes.
How would you differentiate it from International Baccalaureate?
I would say in Cambridge is a little more specific with respect to the classes. It resembles a bit more AP in that sense. There are 2 levels, the AS and then a higher A level. But there are quite a few subjects. One of the first things that we'll have to do is to identify the subset of those subject areas that we would concentrate on. For example, it includes Hindi and Urdu and divinity, as those are subjects that are that are offered by Cambridge International. So anyway, we'll develop a subset of those, and as Josh has indicated, there has already been some work done, and I think this is quite doable to conclude our responsibilities here by the end of the year.
Hey, Ken, I didn't hear those courses. Did you say voodoo?
Well, Urdu, U-R-D-U.
I would just maybe request that in the next meeting of the commission, maybe a little bit more depth on exactly what this is. Is it competing with anything that's currently being provided? And how do our higher education institutions feel about this as an addition to the really the overall education process in Indiana? It'd be interesting to get a little bit more, dig down a little deeper on this.
We can do that.
I was also wondering, maybe that's something we can include next time, what the cost is for students or what that looks like for them and how kind of how it transfers. If that makes sense.
Sure.
Well, and that's a good point, Ann, because part of the work that we're doing by translating it to college credit would allow the department then to pay in a similar way for AP and for international baccalaureate, and so that's a really good point to add in, that the ultimate goal of this would be that if there's funding left over after what the state pays for those programs, it would be able to cover the cost for this. This isn't widely used across our high schools right now. It's only in select ones, so this would allow for if a school wanted to add that as a third option, fourth option, sometimes they have that.
So is it safe to assume that it's more expensive than the others?
I apologize, I don't know the cost off the top of my head, but I can get that for you. The next item within in 1549 is the Prior Learning Assessment Clearinghouse. Prior Learning Assessment, again, is either a test or a portfolio project. It's some way of gauging learning outside of higher education, oftentimes in the workforce, and then correlating that into post-secondary credit. The legislation would require the Commission to work with the Department of Education and the Governor's Workforce Cabinet to create this clearinghouse of all of the opportunities for prior learning assessment to provide credit at the college level by July 1st of 2022. It has specific items within the bill that we need to provide for each of the assessments that our institutions are using, such as the name, the cost, what it translates to, any certifications that it may be a part of on the campus. So we will be working with the institutions to collect that information. They have until March 1st, 2022 to provide the information to us to build out that prior learning assessment clearinghouse. And we must publish this on a website for individuals to look and review. I think this is a great opportunity for us to see what is out there and for us to really highlight the value of prior learning assessment here across the state, especially at a time when we have people re-entering the workforce from being unemployed due to COVID-19. So there's a lot of really good opportunity for us to take advantage of the work that we're doing here with this and with the Commission more broadly.
Can you give us an example?
Josh, are there certain subjects they talk about, or is it just anything, everything and anything?
Well, there are programs like CALE or DSSP Dante, which is used with the military, and they have specific subjects, yes, that are used for that, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So what, could you give us an example?
Of a CALE test, of a prior learning assessment test, so.
Well, one good example actually is the CLEP exams, which are pretty specific with respect to their subject matter. And we've actually done a fair amount of work on CLEP already, which is to say we've identified all of the CLEP exams and have gathered information from each institution on what score is needed to earn credit for a specific course. Dawn Clark is leading this effort here at the Commission, and she, in fact, it just so happened, it had nothing to do with the legislation, but this was time to update the data that we have in place on these CLEP exams, and those updates should be back at the end of the month. And I think one of the things that we can do is to look at the consistency with which scores translate into specific courses, and also to be looking for how scores will translate into courses that are listed on the core transfer library.
So, and so CLEP, if I remember correctly, that's almost every discipline, is that right?
Yeah, it covers all of the major disciplines.
So if you self-educate yourself on whatever, you can take the CLEP exam and then get credit.
Right, yeah, that's right.
It's used a lot with the military, when people
Right.
would exit the military, you want to give them some sort of advanced standing or credit for what they had learned in a different, and in some way to quantify that they actually had learned that. We want to make sure that when people are continuing their education, that there's a measure, the quality of the learning, so that they are prepared for whatever comes next. But it gives them, it does give them encouragement to keep going, and often reduces the cost.
Yeah, there's also a national initiative to promote this, particularly with respect to high school students, another target audience. Modern States is an organization that is providing fees, and actually President Daniels has been very supportive of this kind of approach.
Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, this is Trent Ingers. You're talking a lot about these like CLEP exams, these exams that are facilitated by a third party. But I think for the rest of the commissioners, the thing that really stands out about this piece of legislation for me is there's a lot of things that are going on at the institution. And those could be what I would call departmental challenge exams, where a student could come in and say, I know a lot about this subject, and they could proceed to participate in a university-sponsored exam to demonstrate their knowledge. Or the student might come in with a portfolio. There's some demonstration of performance in a particular area that the university would then evaluate by their faculty in lieu of taking a course. So there's really a number of different channels into getting this credit for prior experience.
Yeah, totally agree, Trent, and we would include those on the list. And one of the things, a couple of things we'd like to find out as a result of the survey that we would conduct would be the clarity with which the policies around departmental exams, challenge exams, or e-portfolios assessments are articulated. How clearly is that articulated? And also fees. To what extent is there a fee associated with taking a departmental challenge exam or having your e-portfolio reviewed? And is there another fee associated if you have a successful review of your portfolio or score well enough on the departmental exam? Is there a fee associated with transcripting that credit on the student's transcript? So, but you're exactly right. Those are things that clearly, these are other PLA methods that would be included in the survey.
Thank you, Ken. I think I said Kale instead of Club at the beginning, so thank you for catching or providing on the insight on that. So we'll be working on that with the institutions here over the course of the next year we have for that, and the Department of Education and the Workforce Cabinet as well to get that launched. But a lot of opportunity there, as everyone has highlighted. The next item within the bill is a work-based learning item that it would require, again, the commission to work with the Department of Education, GWC, and then also the state educational institutions to talk about model guidance and any informational resources about post-secondary enrollment opportunities that include work-based learning. So following a work-based learning opportunity from, let's say, your junior year in high school, and how would that activity then work with enrolling in and earning credit at the college level? How does that work with the employers who are participating? How does that work with the institutions? And essentially it's asking us to give one model program of how that would work. It also talks about how faculty will be involved, timelines for development, just pretty much a very broad item for us to talk about here. And we'll work hand in glove with the Workforce Cabinet and the department on outlining all these. This one of all of them is kind of the broadest in terms of scope of what we can do, so we'll work with them to try to outline over the next few months what that looks like. And this one is due January 1st, so we have one more day to do this than some of the other ones. So we'll take advantage of that. The next three items I want to talk about are the three major reports that we received within 1549. These reports were mentioned in our updates that we send out, but I think it's important that we highlight each of them, as it's going to be a significant amount of work for us over the course of this summer and in the fall. The first one is the business model transformation report. And this report is asking us to look at how our public institutions have cut costs over the last decade. So any actions they've done to maintain or lower costs, and what they can do in the future to continue to maintain and lower costs. The ultimate goal is what will, by 2024, academic year 2024, what can be done to reduce the average total amount a student has to pay for post-secondary education?
No, sorry.
Okay. With that, the second bullet, I'm not going to read all those, but it outlines specific items that we have to include within the report, such as the administration and administrators, are there opportunities there? Buildings, a lot of talk in the committee was about capital projects and the need for change as we go to potentially more online or non-traditional type programs. How we can use technology to reduce costs, the impact of inflation, and they also asked about the percentage of faculty that have tenure. So this is something that we will be sending out our first request to the institutions on for information this week, asking them to provide us their thoughts on this. But we'll be building this out and coming to you all over the course of the next 6 months to discuss this. There is a lot of opportunity here to talk about the good that our institutions have done, and a lot of opportunity to talk about what can be done in the future to make sure we're improving the value proposition of higher education. Also, it highlights in the bill that what can be done without reducing quality. So I think that's important to highlight as well, that, you know, how do we cut costs but maintain the quality of our post-secondary education?
Sorry.
Okay.
I mean, this is a giant undertaking.
Yes.
It is, yeah, it has to be done.
And, I mean,
Well, a lot of the work has to be done at the institutional level first.
pardon me?
A lot of the work has to be done by the institutions first. They're going to, the first staff is going to have to, they'll have to provide to us the information over the last 10 years that
Yeah,
they've
but
done.
November 1 isn't the very long.
No, I tried pretty hard to move that date and unsuccessfully, but
But I mean, being realistic, I mean, y'all don't have the capacity to do this, even to review what the universities do. I mean, this is to do this appropriately, you would need to hire an outside group that specializes in this. And, I mean,
Yeah, I was gonna agree with Al on this one. This is, this could be a really seminal report that could drive a lot of policy going forward. It's, I didn't know if there are funds that come with these tasks, but the idea of having
Teresa's shaking her head, no.
an outside resource would be interesting to me to help with it.
Any idea how this will be approached to do it?
Yeah.
Just
I
everybody?
mean, it's just great.
Yeah, so we developed a timeline since legislative sessions ended, and our first ask will go to the institutions and give them about a month to provide us with what they think would be the best items to include within this. They have all already been thinking around this since the original version of this, which was greatly different than this, was proposed in the first half of session. So we will be asking for that. Once we get all of that information together, we'll review, we'll meet with the institutions to discuss what they would like to highlight, and then we'll find common threads across all those. We've also started looking at, has this been done in other states? What can we pull from things like the Chef report from the CHIO organization? What can we pull out of the value report that just came out yesterday? So we're looking at various items. Once we get the common data and we talk with the institutions about structure, because we know what works for Purdue is not going to work for Ivy Tech, it's not going to work for Vincennes and the regional. So how we break this out will be a big discussion over the next couple months.
Actually, this is the sort of thing that should be continuous, not just with a deadline, and something that you do all the time, but it's part of the responsibility of running the institution. But I think it's good.
Yeah, I think it is something that the institutions do on an ongoing basis. I mean, you know, it's not like they're coming and saying, oh, we got to reduce costs. They're doing this every year. They go through their budgeting and administrative process. This is merely trying to bring it all about and aggregate it. And it's really, I think, a simplified approach from the legislator's perspective. I don't think they fully understand. I think, like you say, Al, I don't think they fully comprehend what they're asking here to really do it effectively. You know, so it is going to take a lot of work on the institution's parts, though it's things they've actually been doing the last, you know, over the last decade already. It's just bringing it forth and putting it in a form that that our team will be able to review and try to put together some kind of report. And I think that's going to be the big challenge, is trying to digest all the information that the institutions provide us and make it really a meaningful report. I think that's going to be a challenge.
It looks like they're asking for an accreditation report, a 10-year accreditation report. I mean, that's literally, those are the things that, so institutions have data on, continuing data on this. Putting it all back together in terms of another form is a whole other ballgame, but.
Well, I think we need to try to think of this as an opportunity, and, you know, beyond what, you know, I sat in that building for 17 years and watched what happened with some of the reports. I'm not saying that this will happen. Some of them are never read. So I think what we want to do, and I'm not being critical, I'm just saying that that you know, sometimes the reports are out there, and the meaningful way to use those reports is marginal. And so what we need to do is, if we're going to commit to working, obviously, which we will because this is our charge, to working with the colleges and universities, how do we make this a report that has meaning and usefulness? And that's what we're going to be working to do. And it's obviously going to rely a lot on our relationship with the colleges and universities, who, as you know, both Mike and Beth have said, they're not going to have to start from scratch to come up with this information. But we're going to have to figure out how to use it.
Yeah, and I mean, here, I don't know, I've never seen it, but I think your point about people reading it, I would encourage, it would be easy to have a 100 or 200 page document from each university that nobody's going to read. If they're going to have that many pages, let's have a 3-page executive summary that hits the big bullets.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. We've had a conversation with the government reps, and a 200-page report is something that we don't want to sit on the shelf. We want to write something that's not going to be read, so we want to make sure it's in a way that can highlight what has been done and what can be done. So we'll make sure that it's done in that way. So, and that's one of 3. So on to number 2. So for our second report, it is this one is a twofold. First, we're to compile how the institutions protect freedom of speech and association on the campus. All of our institutions have a policy around this, and this will be collecting what they are doing on the campus, on our public campuses. Additionally, we're required to recommend a survey to be used to survey the campus on how the perception of free speech on that campus is. So we make a recommendation around an instrument to be used. There are various ones already out there, such as Gallup has a survey, and there are a few others that we can look at to build off of. And the institutions themselves will then survey their campuses. So this one, although it is a very important report, and again, a lot of opportunity to highlight the work that our institutions are doing, this is more of a compilation and then finding that right survey recommendation to be used by our institutions. And ultimately, they will be the ones who have to do the survey, not the commission itself. In this one, we have to have the report again done by November 1st, the same timeline for that. But the institutions have until May 1st of 2022 to administer a survey on their campus for their students. The final report within 1549 for the commission is the foreign malfeasance report. This one's a little bit harder to explain, which is why there's so much on there. Essentially, it's how are our institutions protecting against information that they have that may be used by a foreign entity. We've seen over the years countries try to take intellectual property from our institutions, items like that. So this is how our institutions are guarding against that. And I put some of that's just lifted directly from code, such as the summary of the institution's measures to comply with insider threat requirements prescribed by federal guidance. The institutions worked with the legislature on this one to make sure that the information that they will provide to us, that they will compile, or that we will compile and then produce back, doesn't disclose anything. We don't want to have a how-to guide to get around the protections. So it is done in a way that makes sure that it's appropriate. Obviously, the biggest 2 institutions with this will be Purdue and IU with federal contracts and items of that nature. again, this is more of a collection and summary rather than us doing any significant analysis around that report.
Josh, is this being done throughout the country, in other states?
Yeah, so
In a coordinated way?
this report or the
This effort, I mean, in a sense, we
Um,
wouldn't be the only
so
state and set of institutions that would be.
this is being done across the country. Similar reports like this and similar reports to the freedom of speech report and campuses across the country are doing these types of protections. Specifically, from what I understand, if you want a federal contract, there's quite a bit you have to do around that. So that's the bulk of the work that they're doing. But I'm sure they're doing things that I don't even know or quite understand in terms of that. So we will collect that, we'll produce the report, and we'll bring, again, all of these back to you as we collect them. This will be part of our June meeting. In response to the pandemic, you all know we were remote for all of our meetings over the last year. So there were some lessons learned from that, and those lessons became House Enrolled Act 1437. And it updates how governing bodies such as the commission, courting boards, can meet. So it provides additional flexibility around quorum. It provides additional flexibility around how often you can be remote. It's pretty prescriptive. It includes things that you cannot be remote for, such as adopting a budget, so your vote would not count on that. We're still under the emergency order right now, so we're okay with that. But we will have to update the bylaws in June to reflect these changes. So we will provide a full a memo covering the changes within this bill on how they impact us, as well as updated bylaw language so that we can reflect the changes in statute. And then finally, the General Assembly assigned summer study committee topics this past week. And the Education Summer Study Committee really focused on K-12, but there was an item within the Fiscal Policy Committee that, and I put the exact language on there, that how the higher education regional operating funding mechanism should be structured and funded, which goals should be attained from the funding mechanism, and how achievement of the goals will be measured with reliable data points. So as you read that, although the words do not say it directly, it seems to align with outcomes-based funding and what we're doing with that. We know that this is something we're going to have to look at in light of COVID. So this is a good opportunity to talk with the General Assembly about the work that we're doing around outcomes-based funding and the metrics that we are using. So we will be prepared to join whatever committee they have. There are 7 topics assigned to that summer study committee, so that's going to be a pretty busy one in terms of what they have to get done as well. So we'll be part of that. And with that, what looked like to be a pretty light session in the last month became a pretty busy legislative session in terms of the work that we had to do over the course of the next year or so. So we look forward to the challenge. We look forward to the opportunity to talk about all that we're doing here across the state.
Any questions or discussions, points?
Any of you have any extra time this summer you want to come and hang out at the intern in their office? Just help.
Outcome-based funding, does that mean if you're not graduating good students that know what they're doing, they don't get the money, or how does that work?
Performance funding.
This is our formula that we use to make our recommendations for funding.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, staff. This is always hard work, and still more hard work to come. I'm kind of overcome with the reporting stuff, but I know you'll handle it well.
And the perception
We
of
appreciate
free
that.
speech, that's just a loaded gun.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, you're not done yet, of course.
No, I'm not.
More from you. So we're going to discuss the abandoned grant, and we'll turn it back to Josh.
Well, hopefully you're not tired of hearing from me yet. So
No, we are
like this is the Franco Bannon Grant schedule of awards. And for those of you that have been part of the commission for a while, I apologize. This is going to be the same presentation that you see year over year. For those of you that are new, I'll do my best to make sure I explain this clearly. Sometimes the Franco Bannon grant can be complicated. I will follow in my predecessors, MJ and Dom and Matt and Colby, a common thread amongst all of my previous presenters there on this topic. So with that, the Franco Bannon grant schedule of awards. Each year, the Commission for Higher Education is required to set the Franco Bannon grant amounts. That is one of our largest need-based awards. It provides grants to Indiana residents for up to regularly tuition and regularly assessed fees. Regularly assessed fees being loosely defined in code, but what that is fees charged to everybody on the campus. Students to qualify must file the Fafsa by the deadline. If you did not know, we've extended the deadline. Our new Fafsa deadline is now May 15th, this Saturday. So hopefully we see that. We're still down a little bit compared to where we were on April 15th, 2019, when we used that as a baseline, even when we compare to where we're at this week. We do hope to close that gap over the course of the next couple days as more students file. The Franco Bannon grant is made up of two different awards. Those being the Higher Education Award. Those are the ones at public and proprietary institutions. And then the Freedom of Choice Award, which is at our private nonprofit institutions. The Higher Education Award has an annual appropriation of around $101 million, and the Freedom of Choice Award has an annual appropriation of right at $66 million. In code, the higher, and you'll see this on the chart if you have that in front of you from your agenda book, but we're required to provide a freedom of choice double that amount of what's in the Higher Education Award for a similarly situated student. So if you're a zero EFC, a max need student, your amount at our private nonprofits would be double that of public institutions. The Bannon grant consists of two portions. The base award, which is the amount that we offer you based on your family's income situation, so on your need-based amount, so based on the expected family contribution, the EFC off the FAFSA, and any student performance incentives. So we provide incentives, I'll cover those here in a second, but some of those would be such as like academic honors, so you do well if you've accelerated your time degree, items like that. There are three factors that we look at when we're figuring how much of an Bannon award that we're going to offer a student. As I mentioned, the institution type, so private nonprofits receive one amount, our four-year public institutions receive one amount, and then our Ivy Tech and our proprietary institutions receive another amount. It's also based on, as I mentioned, the expected family contribution, so in the EFC, again, is from the FAFSA, and it is a measure of the family's financial health or strength to pay for post-secondary education. This will change in upcoming years. As I mentioned, the federal government and the Consolidated Appropriations Act in December changed the FAFSA, and EFC will be going away with the 23-24 FAFSA year, and it's going to be called the Student Aid Index. It also has a brand new need calculation that we will be, we're actually modeling it next week, what that would look like. Even though it's 23-24, we kind of need to know well in advance what that's going to look like in terms of budgeting. It also is based on credit completion. So if you remember, to renew the Franco Bannon grant at the full amount, you have to complete enough credits to graduate on time, so 30 credits per year. You can use dual credit, AP, other credits that you've earned prior to post-secondary or prior to enrolling in college to meet that 30 credits. The full-time status award, it's a smaller award, but you have to earn 24 credits to be able to renew on that one. If you earn below 24 credits, you cannot renew the Franco Bannon grant. As mentioned, there are four student performance incentives. The academic honors incentive, which for students leaving high school is based on receipt of an honors diploma. For continuing post-secondary students, it's based on continuing a 3.0 cumulative GPA. If you earn an associate's degree before enrolling in a four-year institution, you also get another incentive for that. There is an accelerative schedule incentive where if a student earns 39 credits per year, so if you're on a path essentially to graduate within 3 years, you can earn a larger award for that. And then what we've called fast track for students who complete credits early in the award year, we can provide an additional award in the summer, essentially moving their award earlier, fast tracking the award to make sure that they have money to complete at a faster rate. This is often used for programs like Ivy Tech's ASAP program. This is the Franco Bannon schedule of awards. You have a larger copy of this within your agenda book that you can see. Just to give you an idea, it can be a little complicated to look at, but on the left-hand side, it has the type of institution, so the private, public, proprietary, or Ivy Tech, the on-time, the full-time amount, and as you go across, it goes up by expected family contribution. Starting with 0 EFC to, at the private nonprofits, you can have an EFC of $8,500 and still receive an amount for an on-time award. Where you see zeros in the amounts, and this confuses individuals each year, and want to explain this, that even if you are a family, let's say you're attending a public four-year institution, and you are in that $4,500 to $5,000 bracket where there's a zero, you can still earn the performance incentives. So if you are a 0 for your base award, but let's say you have an academic honors, so you have a 3.0, you can still earn that $900 incentive by doing under that. So that's why there are some 0 base awards, and anyone else earns, anyone past those numbers would not have a Franco Bannon grant award.
Could I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Clarification. Can you give us an idea of what the income level is at the 4,000 to 4,500 family contribution or above? I mean, it's hard to, I mean, I know that there's a formula, but just a general idea.
Yeah, I can send you some examples. It's really hard for me to be able to do that, and I do apologize, because to calculate EFC, there's a few things we have to look at. We have to look at family size, number in college, the assets the individual has. It's a tougher calculation. Off the top of my head, and this is dangerous because it's a 20-page calculation that I don't know 100%. That if you had a family of 4, around 70,000, you would still qualify for the Franco Bannon grant on the back end. And that depends if you had 2 in college. I will send out about 5 or 6 examples of this with some different family sizes. I appreciate the question because I think that gives an opportunity to highlight what it looks like for different families. So I'll send out maybe a single individual who's an independent, a family of 4, a single parent. I'll send a few of those out at some different income levels to show you how it plays out for each of those. So
yeah, I'm going to ask you even further. That'd be great. That would be very, very helpful. Because, you know, when you talk to somebody about, well, you got to fill out the FAFSA, you got to do this, you got to do that, they go, I'm probably have too much income, or I don't know, or it looks so difficult, they just back off.
Yeah.
And if we're trying to get people to do this, we ought to find a simple way to say, look, you may very well be eligible for this. So maybe there's some kind of, here's the second question, can you put together some kind of a grid that makes it kind of easier to interpolate whether I'm likely to be in a group that could be, that could get some kind of help here?
Yeah, I will do that. I will have to back the asset portion out because that complicates it because there's protections based on different types of assets and if it's a student or parent asset. But I'll put something together. One of the good things about the change to the student aid index is it uses adjusted gross income and takes out a lot of the complicated steps as part of EFC. So I'll provide those examples for this, and I'll try to provide ranges of who might be eligible on each end. But the other thing that I'll do is when we talk about the student aid index, we can see much more clearly under that calculation who is and who is not eligible for awards at that point in time. So I'll work on that and get something to you. It will take probably about a week to run through some of these scenarios, so I do apologize for that, but we'll get that to you sometime next week.
Chris, it's also important when people say that to you that they don't, if a student is going to qualify for merit aid as well as need aid, if they're at an institution that's providing some kind of aid that's not based on need, I mean, any of those things will still require the FAFSA completion. So they shouldn't hedge their bets by saying we don't need it. They should hedge their bets by saying there's a chance that we would get something in some category, so fill it out. And it would be easier to convince people to do that when the form's easier too.
Oh, yeah, no question about it. Thank you.
Just to give you a highlight of what we look at for expenditures over the course of the past few years. This is from fiscal year 2020. We don't have the full fiscal year 2021 amounts. Looking at what we spent so far, we'll hit right about where we're at, or where we were at last year, which will give us some room to spend more actually in the upcoming year. The goal is in 21-22 academic year to have more students participate in the Franco Bannon grant. We could have increased the grid potentially based on the amount that we have. The question is coming out of COVID, we don't know what the uptake is going to look like for this. We're kind of in no man's land on this one. So seeing what it's going to look like, and then we can respond in the second year of the biennium, but the focus will be to have more students take advantage of the Franco Bannon grant over the course of this next year. And we've got ways to do that with our post-secondary partners. Additionally,
I'm reminded that we did increase the grid the last time.
We did increase the grid last year. It was one of the last items that we took on, or that you all took on prior to the pandemic starting. And then finally, just wanted to give you a glimpse of the number of individuals this helps each academic year. And again, we hope that next year this number will take a 2017, 2018 type rise, and we'll see more students being able to access funding for this opportunity.
What happened between 2017 and 2018?
Yeah, I think the biggest factor is that it's a need-based award. So as the individuals went on to post-secondary education, we did see some decline in post-secondary education, but the economy was better. We saw fewer need-based students enrolling in post-secondary. So that was the biggest portion of it. And from 1920, we did see a Fafsa decline. So one of the things that we've done this year in factoring out when to cut off accepting FAFSAs is not just looking at the overall number of FAFSAs that we receive. It's looking down at those buckets that you see within the grid and seeing how many we have underneath each of those. So we've gone a little bit longer this year because we want to make sure we have enough need-based aid students who file the FAFSA to make sure that we're spending the appropriation. So I don't know if that was clear or not, but what we saw is just fewer students would be able to access it.
Okay, this is an action item, so I'll ask for a motion to approve the Bannon schedule of awards.
So moved.
Second? Any other discussion or questions for Josh? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no? Motion carried. Thank you, Josh, for your double duty and more. We appreciate that. And we're ready for the college readiness report, which is one of our favorite things to look at. And Charlie and John are going to give us an overview of that.
First, we're gonna kick Josh and Alexa.
First, we're going to raise the debt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take a second to say thank you very much for formally approving me to do this work. I'm so excited, and I feel like we've hit the ground running, and we've got lots to do and lots more to do, and it's really fun. So appreciate it a lot. So I'm excited to be here today to co-present the college readiness report with Sean Tierney, and we are just gonna jump right in. I'm gonna sort of cover the front half, and then Sean's gonna take away, and then we'll come together at the end. So just want to give a quick reminder of what the readiness report is. It's our annual report that provides information about students' college preparation, access, and performance through the lenses of statewide outlook, county, by corporation, and school. What you can find is a breakdown of high school grads who go to college within 1 year, public, private, in-state, out-of-state breakdown, enrollment by degree type, program type, etc., and performance and success metrics, remediation, GPA, that's all. So a couple of our key takeaways.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm sure I've been told this many times. When the college, does college include going for a certification at Educator? Thank you.
No news here, as we've talked about this a few times already today, as you saw when we sent out the report initially. The college going rate has gone to 59%. First time it's under 60%, at least since we've been tracking this in 2009. And it has been dropping steadily, dropping 6 percentage points in 5 years. Again, just a reminder, this is 2019 high school graduate data. This doesn't actually really even show the impact of COVID-19. One good news story, though, continues to be that the 21st Century Scholars Program is a difference maker for high school graduates. And they are the only group that improved in our 2019 data, going previously from 86% to 88%. And as you can see from the boxes on the right, those students who are low income, their peers that aren't in the scholars program, only went 35% went to college. Even for the higher income students that are not in the scholars program, obviously 64% went to college. So they're far and away, 2.5 times more likely to go, and 25% points higher than their higher income peers. Speaking, continuing with the theme of socioeconomic status, but also pulling in the idea that race and ethnicity has an impact here as well. So as you can see from the chart, and I'm sorry for the colors on the wall, but the bottom sort of darker block, which is a blue, that is the percentage of low-income non-scholars, high school graduates in the class of 2019. The orange in the middle is 21st century scholars, and the gray block on the top is middle and higher income students. So as we just saw on the last slide, looking at those same colors, that you are more likely to go to college if you are a 21st century scholar or a higher income student. So we see that for our Black and Hispanic and Latino students, the percentage of being low income non-scholar is much higher than for the other populations. Another good news story is that and I'm sure Dr. Sauer, if you would like to comment about the Indiana College Score, it's one of his favorite topics as of late, is the fact that more students are earning this opportunity in high school. It's a 30-hour block of general education credit. Just a reminder, it used to be called the statewide transfer general education core, or the STGAC. I have almost forgotten what that means, so I think that's a good thing that we've all adopted the Indiana College Core, because we're off the technical better. So it's a little hard to see, but over 1,600 students earned the core in 2019. And again, our goal is to encourage more students to take intentional dual credit and leave high school with the core in hand. But currently only 1 in 5 about schools offer the core. So that's part of what we're working on from a communication standpoint over this coming year, and we're going to be launching a full-fledged communications toolkit in the fall to help more schools, counselors, teachers, students, parents understand that it's come along with this.
So are you saying 1 in 5 offer the core, but maybe more offer dual credit?
Absolutely. They don't necessarily offer all of the opportunities to take the full core.
And Charlie, do you think it's more the students just not having access to it, or do you think it's the teachers maybe not having the skill set to teach the core? Well, I know that was kind of a thing that they look at, is you have to have that certain accreditation as a teacher to teach these classes.
I think it's probably both. I'm sure Dr. Sauer would have more thought about that, but one of the things that we know that the Higher Learning Commission says that teachers have to be credentialed by 2023. So even though we've been working with Sal, like UIndy, we've got the STEM Teach and the Teach Dual Credit Indiana initiative, but we continue to need more. We need more teachers to sign up and take those opportunities.
I have a question. This doesn't have any this doesn't have any connection to Core 40, does it? Those two separate.
No, that's an actual diploma, and this is an opportunity to take dual credit, and I guess is it technically a certificate that they leave? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I guess that's the question. The prior slide you showed, college equity and access, that is those who are going to college?
No, this is just this is all high school graduates.
all high school graduates, whether they're going to college or not.
Right.
Now, if we also, did you cross-reference that with the slide you just showed? I mean, of all, in terms of breaking down the same groupings, and then looking at who goes to college.
Yeah, I mean, we did that in the early college credit report, right? And so one of the things that we know is that if you have taken the Indiana College Core, you're more likely to come from a white or background or a higher income background as well. So it's absolutely an equity issue as well. Did that answer your question?
Well, I'm not sure it does. I don't know the cause and effect there. I'm trying to get the relationships among all of these with those who are taking the extra courses and what happens in terms of the, I know it affects the graduation. The question becomes how much does it affect the college going rate compared to this slide we showed in terms of equity and access.
Well, I
We're coming to conclusions that I don't know this. I'd like to understand the cause and effect better.
Sure, I think generally, if you're a student who's taking dual credit in high school, you are far more likely to go to college. I don't have the exact number. I don't know if you want to say.
That's probably about 95%.
It's I don't think it's 95%, but it's pretty high. Chris, to your point, it's something that we always run up into all the time, and I know Charlie and Liz are probably tired of hearing us say it, but we always talk about there's selection bias and survivorship analysis, and so these things come into play where you're trying to kind of suss out, which came first, the chicken or the egg. Which came first? A student was going to get dual credit and that helped them go to college, or were they always going to go to college and then they decided to get dual credit to help them prepare? The answer usually comes down to it's a little bit of both, and they tend to feed off of each other, usually in a symbiotic relationship. And so even though we know there are some students that they're probably going to be okay no matter what, we always want to encourage students that whenever possible, get dual credit, get advanced placement credits, get the Indiana College Core, because that little bit can be the difference between what sends them off to college and what helps them find success in college, as well as it oftentimes introduces them to a lot of beneficial peer groups in terms of the students.
I guess what I'm concerned about is we cast a broad net and it may not be getting to the base of the problem. So when we talk about the dollars we spend, are we using them in a laser-like way, or are we just spending a lot of money, people taking more courses and spending less time in college, and we're not really improving the Black, the Hispanic, or the low-income population's opportunities to go to college, or to finish high school for that matter. So it's frustrating because we're not seeing over time the kind of results that we might want to see sustained over time.
Well, that's where the 21st Century Scholars really does show the impact of that program, because that's where we are touching that that demographic and clearly having a huge impact on them. It's just a matter of getting more and more of those, the lower income and minorities into the 21st century program.
Well, and to get them to take these courses, I spoke today to the Indiana Latino Institute this morning, and I went through the numbers that impacted the Latino population, and then I said, the numbers were very sobering, but I said, we collect this data so we can drive change. So what are the things that are making a difference? The first thing I talked about was preparation, getting more students to take the academic honors diploma, to get more of them to take early college credit, to all of those things, especially when you start and you prepare people to do that early, will actually change the college going rate and the success of those students. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And so what's happening is we have far too few low-income and minority students who are being directed to take courses that prepare them for success, both going to college and be successful. And so I think these numbers are really critically important, but what's really important is how does it drive the strategies for change?
Exactly.
In talking with the guidance counselors, and I've done that quite a bit, if they look at a student, are they going to matriculate to college, then yes, they have to take the dual credit. Are they not? And it may be that they make the decision based on their socioeconomic status. I don't know what they make the decision on. But if not, no, don't put them in those classes, put them in the easier classes so they can have a better GPA to graduate with something they're somewhat proud of. So it's that. And then if you talk to a guidance counselor for the, what is the Wendy McNamara Early College, the Ivy Tech, I looked at that for one of my kids and they said, no, that's for other kids. You don't want to put a kid in that. They do need to do the dual credit. And looking back on it now, I think that's probably a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that, the opportunity to take these courses and be academically prepared are not being distributed proportionally across our populations. And so I think, these data points actually show that.
But how do we influence the guidance counselors? Or I guess we don't, but who can?
Well, I think how we pay for college core, for example, is going to make a difference as we include that, like we do with the academic honors diploma. You get more money, so you provide some incentives along the way for that, and you include some of these things in. Sometimes you don't want to do because they're sometimes in the accountability systems. So you have to use every lever you can. But I think the thing that is really unspoken in all of this is how do you get to the families and the communities so that they're asking that their kids take those courses. So they're expecting that their own kids take those courses because, and that they're not left behind for that. So there's plenty for us to learn from these numbers, for sure.
Absolutely, especially because you can earn the college core for up to, but no more than $750. That's a full year of college. So that message, how impactful is that message? And it was, we were able to put that in our Girls College Credit Report. And so it's, again, using our communications and marketing for this whole year of rebranding the Indiana College Core to what it is now, is making sure that that message is out there as often and as much as possible.
And Ken, you might speak just for a moment to the academic rigor of the College Core compared to courses that they take when they're in college. Can you speak to that? Because I know that's a concern.
Yeah, well, first of all, it is based on competencies in 6 different areas, 3 foundational intellectual skills, and 3 ways of knowing: scientific, humanistic, artistic, and social behavioral. Also, those courses that typically comprise the core. Now, at larger institutions, they have a wider array of courses to choose from, but a lot of the courses are drawn from the core transfer library. And there is a regular process for staying on top of those courses. The faculty panels meet together, update those. So there's quite a bit of attention given to the core itself, the competencies, as well as the courses that students typically take in order to complete that core. And then we have data tracking too, which is really important.
So not to confuse and or concern, well, it's a concern. I wrote concern in the slide, so it's a concern. So we're talking about the increase in graduation waivers at the high school level. Nearly 1 in 8 high school graduates in 2019 graduated with a high school waiver diploma. Right, I see the concern looks. This is the highest number in at least 15 years. A little over 12% of the class graduated with a waiver.
That's awful.
Yeah, so one of the, yeah, okay, well, I'm gonna keep going while we take this off. So again, in conversation around race and ethnicity, a quarter of Black Hoosier high school graduates graduated with a waiver in 2019. And 19% who were on free and reduced lunch as well. As you can see at the bottom, why does this matter? Of course, it matters for many different reasons, but one of the easier ones to point to in this report is college going rates are very different for if you graduate with a waiver versus if you graduate without.
Plus, the 28% are more likely to be going to an open access campus. And I've had this discussion with several people since these numbers came out. I checked, for example, and you can correct me, but I think I found out that the incoming class at Purdue West Lafayette had 13 total, not 13%, 13 students who were accepted who had a waiver diploma, and I can pretty much guarantee you that they had a high SAT score. So when you're actually advising students for what their range of options would be, the waiver diploma was intended to be for a very narrow group of students. And it was not intended to be, having 1 in 8 students. I mean, I won't even tell you the schools that I checked into, in some cases, no waiver diplomas before, and now they have them. Now, you would ask the question, why? Why do we see the change? The big change happened because we went from end-of-course assessments to measure students in some of these cases, to actually looking at the I-STEP 10 and I-STEP for language arts and math. So, and so you saw an increase in the number of students who were graduating with the waivers during the same period of time. But I've had a lot of conversations with our K-12 partners as well to try to look at this. And I will just be honest, I had last week, and some people in the office know, I mean, I looked at a lot of our numbers in so many different areas, and I was pretty depressed. I mean, we own plenty of this at the higher ed level too, but, this is back to making the case for the value of education, not just higher education, but the value of education and who we're leaving behind. And you can pretty much connect this to economic mobility in their lives, and they're not gonna have it. Do we expect
Part of my
the 2020
definitive of what is a waiver diploma? Is that somebody that, what? Just
It means that you
incomplete
did not meet the 10th grade proficiency in math and language arts, and you had until the end of the 12th grade to pass those tests before. And if you don't, then you can, the likelihood is you might get a waiver diploma.
So
Somebody
I
can
thought, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think it's safe to say then the GED is more difficult than what the criteria is for these students to graduate.
I honestly don't know, Pepper, for sure about that. That's an interesting point. I've never compared the curriculum for the GED, but there's the graduation qualifying exam where you have to meet proficiency. So, but, we're not going to solve all the problems today, but I think this is really one that we need to be concerned about.
Do we have by any chance any data by school system?
Yes.
On how many of their students are graduating with high school waivers? It'd be interesting to see by school system if there are concentrations where we can tackle it that way.
There absolutely are.
Tell us, do tell. I mean, it looks like you know.
Well, this is part of what we do when we send out this information, and actually, to the credit of K-12, our principals and our superintendents are using this data. We provide this at the school level, at the district level, so they know, what's happening here.
We have a top 10 list in the there's a top, there's sort of a top 10 list by county, right, in the report, and then the whole state, there's now.
I remember this coming up 3, 4, or 5 years ago, and I thought the state tried to address it and dramatically reduce the number of waivers, and only in extenuating circumstances was waiver be granted, and now it seems to be out of control again. And to be perfectly honest, I don't even know how you can justify an extenuating circumstance.
Well, sometimes if students have an IEP, have an individual education plan or a special education.
Special ed would be, but I mean, what happened? Why all of a sudden did it jump back up?
I think it's because we changed the measure to measure proficiency, and more students were not reaching a proficient level. And
so they gave it to them anyway.
I mean,
it is truly outrageous.
So is
who's in charge of all this education stuff?
So is this one of those where 10% of the population owns 90% of the problem? Or
To be honest, it's pretty widespread across the state, and I mean, you can see by school, and I'll get into a little bit. I won't call out any schools here, but by school,
Why not?
Yeah. Only because we'd never get done. But it's not as if the rise of last year was across the board. Some counties shot up, like I want to say Vancouver County, both because it's so big and because it rose so much, it accounted for like 20% of the total increase in waivers last year. But I mean, it's spread across the state where, schools you wouldn't even necessarily expect, they went up a little bit, it's.
But I think if you look at a common denominator of poverty, you would have to assume, based on some of those socioeconomic status, race and ethnicity, We know that, 2/3 of the high school graduates who are Hispanic are low income. I mean, a lot of these things you can trace to some of these things, which makes it even, a greater sense of urgency that we address these issues.
Teresa, isn't it because they continue to be brought along when they should have been taught? Or that maybe they've been pushed along? I mean, to say that somebody's going to be here just because of poverty, that to me it seems to be an excuse. It's because the school system has not addressed it earlier on in these kids' educational careers.
Yeah, poverty is not the answer, but poverty in terms of, it shouldn't be the answer, but it is the answer, but it is the data point that we're pointing to, that it is the data point that we're looking at that's underneath those, which is, you're right, I mean,
Well, the incredible thing is, sorry, this just drives me crazy. But if you look at graduation rates from high school, it's gone up, and we're patting ourselves on the back about what a great job we're doing. Well, it's going up because we have all these waivers. It's just, we're just misleading ourselves.
I mean, it's the race and ethnicity. Instead of addressing the issue, we just pass them along. I mean, that's all.
Make them repeat the third grade so they get there. If you don't get your fractions and decimals in the 3rd and 4th grade, you're never going to get them. So just don't let them, just keep them, make them do the 3rd grade twice, the 4th grade twice.
I think this is a
Yeah.
perfect example of why it's so important for us to be aligning with our K-12 partners and working on these things so that the conversation we keep having about blurring the lines between, K-12 and post-secondary, I think are absolutely true. I mean, we own plenty of this when people get on a college campus too. We don't have, if you look at the college completion rates, you would see some similarity based on some of these same issues with completion and on time. So, this is not about pointing our fingers at our K-12 partners. It's really about getting under the data and figuring out what are the strategies for change.
Yeah, and the family breakdown is probably one of the biggest things. There are no dads in those black families.
Well, that's true.
Well, I'm going to move us on.
Yeah.
Well, when are you the numbers on men going to college?
I just wonder if we should ask Katie Jenner to explain it.
I think maybe this is something for another bigger line. We're kind of on big issues, and we've got other ones to be presented. So I'm going to try to move the discussion on, but make the note that we really would like to continue
I
looking
think Sean
at
has
this.
just a couple other, I'm sure just a couple other things that we could frame this before we move on if we have time. I think
Fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it moves this discussion to the next.
Sure. And so one of the things that we always want to talk about and has been brought up numerous times over the last few minutes is how do we make sure that this information is actionable? And so while we talk a lot about the state level report, and we talk about the readiness report as a report, it's actually 900 different reports. And so one of the ways we make it actionable is we provide one for every county, every school corporation, every high school in the state. So that's 92 counties, 500 schools, 300 corporations. More than 6,000 pages this report is, and so that's partly why I'm not going to go school by school, but we want to be able to provide all of this information to the folks who are actually on the ground, principals, counselors, families, and so all of the data points I'll be talking about right now, we provide in those breakdowns. So again, the college going rate, 59% overall. Of that 59%, about 87% stayed in state. So that brings out to about 51% of all high schoolers who walk across that stage to get a diploma. 51% will end up at an in-state institution, public or private. We also break it out by race and ethnicity. Again, we always want to pull out a lot of those different demographic pieces. By income, by geography, by gender, and we also, again, oftentimes show our 21st century scholars who are a great piece in all of this. Again, we also break down enrollment types, for lack of a better word, for our students, and again, for every high school in the state. And this is where we start to look just at our public institutions. For long data reasons, we typically only look at our public institutions for this particular piece. And this is a good moment to say that even though we're talking about the class of 2019, doesn't mean that we waited around until just now to look at the 2019 students. Kind of like how whenever anyone says, when you look at the night sky, the light from the stars have been traveling for a long time. These data points have been traveling for a long time, and we really want to thank our partners for working with us over the last year to make this happen. It's a massive auditing process, again, 6,000 pages. So many thanks to Alex Parkinson and Allison Marti here, who have spent a big chunk of the last 6 months digging through these data points. Thanks to Department of Education, thanks to the institutions for also providing a lot of these different data points. That said, of those students who went to a public institution, about 70% were pursuing a bachelor's, about 25% were pursuing associate's degrees, and the remainder were pursuing certificates, or there was a slight amount of undecideds. And so that's kind of basically the market share breakdown for credentials. Over the last year or so, bachelor's and associates lost a little bit of the market share, and certificates bumped up a little bit. We also break it down. We also want to know what are students pursuing? And so this is not what they graduate with. This is what they initially start pursuing. So you start to see kind of, about a quarter of our students are interested in pursuing STEM programs, and that's how they start off. And then health, obviously, allied with STEM is pretty high as well. And most of our students tend to be full-time. We also break it down by remediation. Increasingly, as our remediation rates have decreased over the last few years, we've typically kind of not had a lot of news to report, but it tends to be pretty positive. About 9% of the students coming in as a first-time student to our colleges straight from high school need math or English or both remediation. As always, typically male students need more remediation than women, but there's a lot of other interesting breakdowns that are both in these reports, and we'll also be teasing out a lot more in our upcoming equity report.
I thought that Ivy Tech was taken of doing the remediation. Is that still the case?
Yes, if you need remediation, you are supposed to start at a 2-year institution, and increasing numbers of those students are being placed in credit-bearing courses under what's called the co-requisite model. So they're not put in standalone remediation courses. They're put in the credit-bearing course and receive special supports to make them successful. And it's been proven that that's more successful than for most students than putting them in standalone remediation.
Yeah.
Student performance. This is where we sneak in, if you know where to look, just a little bit of that first COVID pandemic year. So again, because these are 2019 high school graduates, we look at their first year of college, which means that they were second semester, first year students when COVID hit. We initially didn't really know what to make of some of these numbers at first, because we, quite frankly, didn't know what to expect. And so we didn't really call much attention to it, because this is going to be one of those things that we probably won't know what really happened for a few more years. But generally speaking, GPA and credit completion was flat to slightly up. And so some pretty positive signs there in terms of, we wouldn't have been surprised if, the floor dropped out, and we wouldn't have been surprised if, the numbers made no sense. So to just see kind of a slight uptick, kind of in line with the multi-year trend, was pretty reassuring. Again, this is something that we'll know more a few years from now, but generally speaking, students who start full-time, they end up finishing their first year with a little over 22 credits. So, we'd like to see that a little bit higher, but it's continuing to improve. And things like our credit completion requirements in Franco, Bannon, and 21st Century Scholars, I think are playing a big role in, at least for our financial aid recipients, in helping them complete more credits. And then for recommendations, again, we wanted to try to think through how can we best close a lot of these equity gaps that we're seeing. And this is something that will take a lot of student support. Our outreach team is each and every day thinking about how can we reach students who really need assistance, communications, data, all through the works. We're always thinking about how can we both improve all of these rates across the board, but also close gaps at the same time. And part of that will be working with the high schools to help them understand what their own numbers are doing and what happens to their students after they walk across that stage and get a high school diploma. And so making sure that we have that data and that transparency there about how their students do. Again, beating the drum of the Indiana College Core and encouraging more students to get dual credit. It's one of the best ways to help students both prepare and see themselves as college students. We want to encourage more students to pursue teaching. We all talk a lot about how we need more teachers. Again, a lot of the initiatives that we saw in the State House this year in terms of encouraging higher starting salaries for teachers, that will be likely to happen, as well as helping our own students through the next generation for sure, as educator scholarships and other programs pursue teaching to close that leaks in the pipeline. And finally, again, we're always looking to improve FAFSA completion rates. This was something that we've seen a little bit of a dip over the pandemic, and it's something that we want to find each and every way we can to contact students, to let them know about opportunities, and to encourage more and more students to apply.
And we'll continue to have recommendations at the end of all of our reports, so that's something that you can count on seeing for all of our upcoming all items.
It's hard to say thank you enough for the kind of work that you do. And I was just sitting here thinking, the only way you can make changes is to understand exactly what the circumstances are and what the relationships are to all these things. And you do that for us constantly. What it does, of course, is arise in us the need to try to find the solutions, but that also requires really looking at the data. So we're very appreciative of your good work and the fine reports that come out of this office. Just terrific. We have one academic degree program for full discussion today. We'll invite our guests to come forward. You probably know that on the occasion of thinking about programs, the Academic Affairs Committee frequently comes to the point where we see something that we think everybody really should know about this. Also, we come sometimes with, there's a problem with this, we'd like you to take a look at. But this time, it's definitely, we thought that this program was so much of interest to us, given the work that we're linked to, and to the impact on the state that this is likely to have. So we put this program on the agenda for that reason. The Associate of Applied Science in Smart Manufacturing and Digital Integration will be offered by Ivy Tech Community College. We have with us two representatives from the School of Advanced Manufacturing Engineering and Applied Science to present the program. I'm pleased to welcome Dean Andrea Swartz and Department Chair Bryce Eaton, who will provide an overview, and then Ken will provide the discussion and recommendation from the staff, and we'll talk about it a little bit. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you so much for having us today. We are thrilled to come and talk about this new program in smart manufacturing and digital integration. And this work really started a long time ago. We, on a regular basis, hold meetings with our industry partners through our advisory boards. And we talk about workforce needs, and we talk about industry trends and what's really happening. And we started hearing these rumblings about Industry 4.0. And that's a word that we hear a lot out there, but what does that really mean? So if we take it back a little bit, Industry 1.0 is really that mechanization, the starting of using machines to produce goods. We moved to Industry 2.0, which is industrialization. Think about mass production. And then Industry 3.0 is really where we started adopting robotics and automation. Industry 4.0 is things like big data, cloud computation, autonomous robots, system integration. There is some information in your packet about that as well. We also started collaborating with an organization called the Smart Automation Certification Alliance, or SACA, S-A-C-A. And what they did is they collaborated with a group of employers to identify these really key competencies that they're looking for in individuals for these new positions within their production facilities. And so our role in that was to really validate the certifications that SACA was putting forward through a pilot program. So our instructors took certifications, and so we looked at what are those key competencies and how can we assess them. So we also, through this process, looked at our own programs. So where are we meeting the need in Industry 4.0 from a training perspective? And our current programs focused on that Industry 2.0, the industrialization. We have a program that focuses on Industry 3.0 and automation and robotics. But we too needed to adopt a new program to meet this Industry 4.0 need. So what we did is we put our subject matter experts, our faculty members on a team. Bryce was one of those. And this team was diverse in the sense that Ivy Tech is a statewide system, and so we wanted to make sure that we covered the geography of Indiana, the manufacturing differences that are there and exist across the entire state. And what they looked at is our course inventory. So what do we currently have in our degree programs that meet some of these competencies that have been identified by industry and validated through SACA? And what courses do we need to add? What could be a sequence of courses that's needed to meet this need a little bit better? And so we really developed out this smart manufacturing and digital integration program to help meet that need. Our instructors are going through training. Bryce completed 40 hours just last week of training to get the certifications. We're also improving and upgrading our equipment because with anything in technology, these advanced technologies, we see an increase in equipment needs and that hands-on experience. And I was so glad, Commissioner Lovers, that you brought up the Brookings Institute report. We too have studied that and read it, front ways, back ways, every ways. And we think too that this really fits in with that key strategy of accelerating the digital adoption across the state, is that if we can provide skilled workforce to these manufacturers, they're more likely to adopt some of these new digital skills. So with that, I appreciate you guys giving us a few minutes today to talk about it. We're happy to entertain any questions, and we'll turn it back over to Dr. Sauer.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. As Dean Schwartz just indicated, industry certifications are built upon competencies and assessments and are recognized by industry. The Commission has rightly been focused on quality assurance in ways in which we can have confidence that programs are being taught in a quality way, are delivering outcomes that are of sufficient quality so that the students can succeed. And in general, one of the things that we focus on in all program proposals that are brought to the Commission are the industry certifications. For the reasons I just stated, to the extent that we can identify industry certifications that are associated with a particular program, it's yet another way to provide some assurance because of this external validation. And I think one of the reasons why the committee felt that this program should be brought for full discussion is because there were so many certifications that were built into it. The 4 associate SACA certifications and then 14 specialized certifications. So anyway, we thought this was a good example to touch upon this idea of industry certifications as a way to assure quality in our programs. I would point out that this particular program does require 70 semester hours, so it does exceed the standard credit hour expectation. The legislation that mandated 60 hours for an associate degree and 120 hours for a baccalaureate degree did allow for some exceptions and based upon different things, licensure, accreditation, but also because of the expectations from industry. And we thought because there is so much packed into this particular program, which draws from 3 existing associate degree programs, we felt exceeding the standard expectation by 10 semester hours was a legitimate exception and would be okay to for the commission to approve.
The other thing that the legislation also said, a clear benefit to the student for exceeding those hours, and clearly this kind of industry certification is a clear benefit to the student.
Absolutely. The other thing that I would point out that this program is an associate of applied science and AAS, so it doesn't have the same kind of transfer expectations that an associate of science program would have. In this case, I think the college, as has been the case with really all of the programs it offers, would definitely want to have a transfer option put in place, and indeed the college has indicated that it will be working on that. But because this smart manufacturing program fits so well with the needs of our manufacturing sector, which is so critical to our economy, from a staff perspective, I guess we thought it was better to move this program along and then to have the transfer expectations satisfied at a later point. So I just wanted to point out a few features, and with that, be pleased to make the staff recommendation, which is that the commission approve the Associate of Applied Science in Smart Manufacturing and Digital Integration to be offered by IBTech.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carried. Congratulations, thank you, Dean Schwartz, and Professor Heath. Okay, we have 4 additional academic programs as well that we reviewed in the committee. They are for your attention as an expedited item, and they are on page 55 of your agenda book. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Soon they're all ayes.
Somebody's swimming now.
A little tougher. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We have some information items on page 61, degree programs awaiting action, academic degree staff actions, and media coverage as well. Our next meeting is going to be in South Bend, so it'd be nice to be on the road again. Indiana University South Bend on June the 10th. Is there any other business? If so, we are adjourned. Oh, I will do it.
Official.